My father's last message to me was 4 words. What have you done? He didn't ask that when my mother slapped me in front of everyone at my sister's wedding for refusing to hand over my penthouse. He asked it only when the deal meant to save his company evaporated overnight because of his own actions. He thought I had ruined him. The truth is, I just stepped aside and let him ruin himself. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're tuning in from. We love seeing how our stories connect people from all around the world. Your comments and thoughts bring this community to life, and we're so grateful to have you on this journey with us. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, grab a cozy seat, maybe a cup of coffee or tea, and prepare yourself for a tale that will captivate your heart from beginning to end. Let's begin. My name is Eleanor Vance. My father's last message to me was 4 words. What have you done? He didn't ask that when my mother slapped me in front of 200 guests at my sister's wedding for refusing to hand over my penthouse. He asked it only when the deal meant to save his company evaporated overnight because of his own actions. He thought I had ruined him. The truth is, I just stepped aside and let him ruin himself. The day began under the deceptively gentle California sun. At a historic wine country estate my parents had rented for my little sister Clara's wedding. It was a place of old stone and older oak trees, meticulously curated to project an image of timeless elegance and stability, an image that, I knew, was a carefully constructed facade, our family business, Vance Heritage Furnishings, a company built on my grandfather's legacy of handcrafted furniture, was quietly sinking under the weight of its own tradition. They were betting everything on a potential acquisition by Aura Home Goods, a luxury retail conglomerate. The wedding wasn't just a celebration, it was the final, most expensive stage of a performance designed to impress the Aura executives who were mingling among the guests. This entire day was a business transaction veiled in white roses and champagne. I felt like a glitch in their perfectly coded program. My silk dress, a deep sapphire blue, was elegant and minimalist, the kind of dress that speaks quietly of confidence in boardrooms. Here, it was a liability. My mother, Catherine, drifted towards me, her own gown a cascade of floral lace, her smile as tight as the pearls around her neck. "Eleanor, darling," she began, her eyes scanning my outfit with faint disapproval. "That dress is lovely, but so corporate, a bit cold for a family celebration. Don't you think we're trying to create a sense of warmth today?" I understood her meaning perfectly. I was not projecting the correct brand image. The brand was Vance Heritage, warm, traditional, timeless. I, with my tech startup and my Sharp City clothes, was a discordant note. My father, Robert, joined us, placing a heavy hand on my shoulder. He was talking to Mr. Davenport, one of the key executives from Aura. "This is my eldest, Eleanor," he said. The introduction clipped, offering no further details as if my name was a complete sentence. Mr. Davenport smiled politely, a man accustomed to such social maneuvers. "A pleasure. And what do you do?" Eleanor, before I could answer. My father cut in with a hearty laugh, his hand squeezing my shoulder just a little too tightly, a familiar gesture of control. "Oh, Ellie's involved in some of that computer stuff in the city. Very complicated. Today, let's focus on things that last. Shall we, like solid oak and family bonds?" He steered the conversation back to his failing business, leaving my entire career my company that analyzed market data with predictive algorithms, my team of brilliant engineers, my years of 80-hour weeks reduced to a dismissive wave of his hand. I saw the narrative he was weaving. He was the patriarch of tradition. Clara was the beautiful future, and I was the irrelevant, slightly eccentric outlier whose modern world was too complex and frivolous to be taken seriously. It was a role I had played my whole life, Clara was the artist, the dreamer, the one who was praised for her watercolor paintings and her gentle nature. I was the builder, the planner, the one who was given a pat on the head for good grades, but gently discouraged from being too ambitious. I remembered being 12 and building a complex website for a school project, while Clara was praised for a week for making a lopsided clay pot. My father had looked at my code and said, "That's nice, honey, but don't strain your eyes." He displayed Clara's pot on the mantelpiece. Later, as guests gathered on the veranda, a well-meaning aunt cornered Mr. Davenport and me. "You should see Eleanor's place in San Francisco," she gushed. "A stunning penthouse. Robert and Catherine must be so incredibly proud." A flicker of something unreadable annoyance panic crossed my mother's face before she composed it into a beatific smile. She glided over, placing a hand on the aunt's arm. "We're proud of all our children's successes," she said, her voice smooth as polished mahogany. "Our family has always believed that success is something to be shared. It strengthens the whole." Her words hung in the air, a beautiful, poisonous sentiment. They weren't proud of my success. They saw it as a resource, another asset to be leveraged for the family brand. My penthouse wasn't a home I had earned. It was a prop they could use. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the vineyards as the reception began. My father took the stage for his speech, his voice booming with practiced confidence. He spoke of legacy, of heritage, of the values passed down through generations. His eyes kept finding Mr. Davenport's table, ensuring the performance was landing with its intended audience. "And speaking of legacy," he declared, his voice rising with emotion, "there is no greater legacy than a home, a place to build a future. That is why, as her parents, Catherine and I are so deeply moved and proud to announce that our eldest daughter, Eleanor, has chosen to give the most incredible wedding gift." My blood ran cold. The ambient warmth of the evening vanished. I felt a chill creep up my spine as the casual conversations around me began to fade into a dull roar. This wasn't happening. It was a joke, a terrible, misjudged joke. But I looked at my father's face, earnest and grandstanding, and I knew it was real. "She has decided to gift her magnificent penthouse in the city to her sister Clara and our new son, Liam, so they may begin their new life together, a gesture that truly embodies the spirit of Vance Heritage family above all else." The room erupted in applause. The sound was a physical blow, pressing me down into my seat. The Aura executives were nodding, smiling, visibly impressed by this grand display of familial generosity. Of course they were. It was a perfect story. A story of a family so cohesive, so selfless, that individual assets were merely communal resources. Clara, a perfect actress, pressed her hands to her chest, her eyes wide with feigned shock, though a small, triumphant smile played on her lips. Liam wrapped an arm around her, beaming. Every light, every eye, every expectation in that room turned to me. They were waiting for me to play my part, to smile through my own erasure and validate their beautiful lie. I could see their strategy laid bare. They weren't just taking my home. They were consuming my success, digesting it, and presenting it as their own to close a business deal. My father, the grand conductor of this public humiliation, raised his hand and gestured toward me. "Eleanor, my dear, come up here," he called out, his voice thick with false sentiment. "Come and say a few words about this beautiful gift for your sister." He wasn't just asking for my property. He was demanding I become an accomplice in the theft, forcing me to speak the lie myself. For him. For the deal. Time seemed to slow down as I stood up. The scraping of my chair felt unnaturally loud in the sudden quiet. I could feel 200 pairs of eyes following me as I walked toward the stage, each step measured and deliberate. I felt strangely calm, the kind of cold, clear focus that comes when there are no good options left, only the necessary one. My mind was a whirl of memories every late night, every sacrificed weekend, every risk I took to build my company, to earn the money that bought that home, my sanctuary, the one place on earth that was mine, built not on heritage, but on sheer, relentless effort. I took the microphone from my father's outstretched hand. His smile was a rigid mask, but I could see the steel in his eyes, a command. "Thank you, Dad," I began, my voice steady, carrying clearly across the silent ballroom. "I love my sister very much, and I wish her and Liam a lifetime of happiness." I paused, letting the room hang on the expected next words, giving them one last chance to realize what they were doing. Nothing. However, I'm afraid there has been a serious misunderstanding. A collective intake of breath swept through the guests. The applause died instantly. My father's smile faltered, a crack in the facade. "Eleanor," he said through his teeth, his voice a low warning just for me. "Don't be difficult." "I'm not being difficult," I replied, still speaking into the microphone for all to hear. "I'm being clear. The penthouse is my home. I worked for it, I paid for it, and I am not giving it away." The whispers started then, rippling through the tables like a spreading fire. I saw Mr. Davenport from Aura lean over to his colleague, his expression shifting from impressed to confused, then to alarm. My mother, seeing her carefully crafted image shattering, rushed onto the stage. She snatched the microphone from my hand. "She's joking, of course," she announced to the crowd with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Eleanor has such a wonderfully dry sense of humor." Then she turned to me, her face a mask of fury, her whisper a venomous hiss. "You will not ruin this. You will not ruin everything we have worked for. Do you understand me? You are not going to destroy this family." "This family is destroying itself," I said, my voice low but firm enough for her to hear. I looked past her to the crowd, which was now watching with morbid fascination, before my gaze returned to her face. Contorted with rage and desperation, I shook my head, a small final gesture. "No." The word, quiet but absolute, was all it took. Her control snapped. The sound of her hand connecting with my cheek was sharp and ugly, a crack that echoed in the ballroom's perfect acoustics. My head snapped to the side from the force. For a moment, there was absolute, stunned silence. The photographer's flashes stopped. The string quartet faltered mid-note. My pearl earring, a gift I'd bought myself to celebrate my first $1 million contract, flew from my ear and skittered across the polished dance floor. I didn't touch my burning cheek. I just stood there, letting the silence scream for me. The pain was secondary to the profound sense of violation. This wasn't just an assault. It was an act of ownership, a declaration that they had the right to discipline me, even now, in front of the world, then slowly, deliberately. I bent down, my movements precise, and picked up the tiny pearl from the floor. I carefully refastened it to my ear, my hands steady. I straightened my dress, looked directly at my mother's shocked face, a horror dawning in her eyes now that the act was done, and then at my father's ashen one. Without another word, I turned and walked off the stage. I didn't run. I walked with the same steady pace I used when leaving a boardroom, all the way through the ballroom, past the stunned faces of their business prospects and relatives, and out into the cool night air. The moment the heavy oak doors closed behind me, sealing in their chaos, I pulled out my phone. My hands were trembling now. I didn't call for revenge. I called my mentor, Julian, my voice breaking as I told him what they had done. The immediate aftermath was a blur of quiet efficiency. Julian, ever the strategist, didn't offer platitudes. He listened, his silence a comforting presence on the other end of the line. And when I was done, he simply said, "Stay where you are. I'll book you a suite. Don't talk to them. Don't answer any texts. Go dark." His response was immediate. I spent the night in a 5-star hotel I couldn't even remember checking into, my cheek throbbing, my phone silenced against the incoming storm of calls and texts from my family. The next morning, sitting in the sterile quiet of the hotel room, I saw it. A short, grainy video, clearly filmed on a guest's phone, had started making the rounds. It wasn't viral in a public sense, but it was spreading like wildfire through the closed, interconnected circles of San Francisco's business elite, the very people my parents had been so desperate to impress. The climax of my story wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It was something far quieter, colder, and more devastating. It arrived not with a bang, but with the soft chime of an incoming email. Julian had only made one phone call. He didn't threaten or demand anything. He had simply called a friend, a senior board member at Aura Home Goods, as he later recounted to me. The conversation was brief and professional. "Are you aware of the leadership style at Vance Heritage?" he had asked calmly. "I'm looking at a video of one of their principals physically assaulting their own daughter in a business setting for control of an asset. I just thought, from a brand integrity and risk management perspective, you'd want to be aware of the kind of culture you're potentially acquiring." He didn't need to say more. In their world, such a public loss of control wasn't a family drama. It was a fatal business liability. It spoke of instability, poor judgment, and a shocking lack of professional decorum. By Monday afternoon, my father forwarded me an email. There was no text from him, just the forwarded message, a white flag of digital desperation. The sender was from Aura Home Goods' legal department. The subject line was stark, regarding the proposed acquisition of Vance Heritage Furnishings. The body of the email was polite, professional, and absolutely brutal. It spoke of a reevaluation of cultural synergy and unforeseen concerns regarding leadership stability. It concluded with a single sentence that sealed my family's fate. "Therefore, we are officially withdrawing our offer and terminating all negotiations at this time." A few minutes later, a text from my father finally came through. It was the message that started this story, the one that showed he had learned nothing at all. 4 words dripping with accusation and a complete lack of self-awareness. "What have you done?" I never answered his text. My silence was the answer. I didn't need to destroy his company. He and my mother had already done that. They had leveraged everything: their home, their reputation, their own child on a single desperate gamble. And they had lost because their foundation was rotten. My revenge wasn't an act of aggression. It was simply my refusal to continue being the pillar that held up their crumbling facade. I just stepped away and let gravity do the rest. In the months that followed, Vance Heritage Furnishings collapsed, not in a dramatic explosion, but in a slow, quiet implosion. Without the Aura acquisition, their creditors called in their loans, and the company was forced into bankruptcy. I read about it online. The sterile business articles telling a story of market shifts and changing consumer tastes. But I knew the real reason. They hadn't failed to adapt to the market. They had failed to adapt to the reality that their children were not assets to be liquidated. My parents had to sell the family home, the house I grew up in, to cover their debts. Clara's perfect marriage to Liam dissolved in under a year, unable to withstand the pressure of financial ruin and the ugly truth of her family's entitlement. She texted me once, a long, rambling message about how I had ruined her one chance at happiness. I read it, then deleted it without a reply. There was nothing left to say. I poured my energy into my own life. My company thrived. I used a portion of my earnings to create a mentorship program for young women in tech, a place where their ambition would be celebrated, not seen as a character flaw. My penthouse, once the symbol of a conflict, became my sanctuary. It became a place where I hosted brainstorming sessions and networking events, filling it with the laughter and energy of a new kind of family, one I had chosen, one built on mutual respect and support. One evening, about a year after the wedding, I found an old newspaper clipping while cleaning out a drawer. It was an article about the fall of Vance Heritage. It included a quote from my father. "In the end," he had told the reporter, "we were a traditional company that just couldn't keep up with the changing times." I looked at his words, and for the first time, I felt a sliver of pity not for his loss, but for his profound, unshakable blindness. He still didn't get it. They hadn't been defeated by changing times. They had been defeated by their own unchanging values. They believed family was about control, that success was a communal resource, and that love could be demanded. That was the story they told themselves, right up until the end. I let the clipping fall into the recycling bin, turned, and looked out my floor-to-ceiling windows at the city lights twinkling below. I hadn't lost a family. I had escaped a cage. And I had finally learned that the most powerful thing you can build isn't a company or a home, but a life where you are the sole and undisputed owner. And so, a story ends, but the questions it leaves behind often echo long after. We learn that sometimes. The most profound acts of self-love are not loud declarations, but quiet departures. It's the refusal to set yourself on fire just to keep others warm. True family isn't found in a bloodline, but in the people who celebrate your light, not those who try to dim it for their own comfort. Success, we find, isn't an inheritance to be claimed by others, but a fortress you build brick by brick with your own integrity. The ultimate revenge is not destruction, but a life lived so fully and peacefully that the past and its ghosts no longer have power over you. It is the quiet act of choosing yourself, again and again. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We all face moments where we must choose between the role we are given and the person we are meant to be. What boundaries have you had to build to protect your peace? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story matters here. If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that empowers and inspires. We're grateful to have you in our community.